So I want to make a quick video talking about something I like to call the delegation pattern or the delegate pattern. This is a pattern that I've used quite a bit actually in the whole Apple ecosystem. So if you're not familiar with iOS programming, there's a number of APIs that you still use this date that essentially have what's called a delegate pattern. And some languages, as an example, like in C# as an example, there actually is a delegate object that you can create. But in the Cocoa APIs, Cocoa Touch APIs, they actually have a pattern that they use. It's called the delegate pattern. And the whole idea is that you can essentially use functionality from another object in your object without having to inherit from that object. And the reason why they did that is because with a lot of the modern object-oriented programming languages like Swift and Java and C# as an example, you can inherit from another base class, but you can't inherit from multiple classes at the same time. And so JavaScript is actually not that different in the sense that you can have one object that inherits from another object, but you can only do it once. And so if you want to be able to kind of leave yourself open and essentially decouple your application so that you're not tightly coupled to, let's say, a base object or a parent object, it's quite easy to do that using this pattern. So let's take a quick look and see what this looks like inside of JavaScript. So what we're looking at right here is kind of a standard inheritance type of pattern that you might use if you're coding something in JavaScript. So here I have a parent object that I'm defining here with this function and a child function here that's also creating a child object. And then what I'm doing is I am coming here and I'm taking the prototype of the child and I'm setting it to the prototype from the parent. So this was what allows me to do inheritance. If you're using the class word syntax, you can just do extends to do the same thing that I'm doing here. And then what I've done is I've defined a number of different functions. So I have one here for doing work on the child from the parent. And then I have another one here that is basically, it's kind of like a speak. It says hello to me. And then I have another one here for setting status. And this is a way that we can pass the status of something back into the child object. And then if we look down here on the child, I have a number of different functions that I've created. One I've created for essentially starting the whole process up. I have another one for printing. Just basically, this is kind of like a say hello kind of type thing. And then I have a set status function, just like we did before on the parent. But the difference here is that I'm actually overriding the functionality in the parent. So if I ever come down here and let's say I want to run this example, I can just say node index.js. And we can see here that it is made this status call and it's got a result back here. So what's happened here is if we look in this, when I call the do work for child, and I'm doing that here in the start method here, what it's going out and doing is it's actually using the set timeout, and then in the set timeout, once it's finished completing, it's getting the current time and it's passing that back into the set status. So that's all fine. This works fine, but I want to show you what this looks like using the delegate pattern. So if we come right here, I've taken all those different functions that were available inside of the parent object, and I put them inside of this create worker. This is actually just a factory function that's going to return back a new object with all these different methods in here. And one of the things I've done is I've used closure here to essentially encapsulate this delegate variable here inside of the factory function. And then right here I have this additional method here called setDelegate, and what that's going to do is from another object, if I want to essentially create a reference back from that object into this worker object, I can basically pass it off. And now that it has a reference for the for this delegate object, I can actually come in here and I can actually make calls off of this delegate object. So now if I come over here, I have this this actual delegate object, and what this is doing is it's actually importing in the worker, and then I am using that create worker function to create a new object here called worker. And then I'm also doing something very similar here. I have a factory function here inside of this file that's creating a delegate. And so if we look at this, same methods as before in the child. I'm doing it. I have a start, I have a print, I also have a set status. And one of the things that's nice about this is that if we looked at the worker, I didn't have to override the status. I'm just to be able to have this on my delegate object here, and it just knows to call that. So if I come back here to the delegate, one of the things I've done here, it's a little bit different from my other factory function, is that instead of just returning this object.freeze with the methods in there, I'm actually creating an instance. And the reason why I'm doing that is so I can actually set the delegate of the worker to this instance. And now if I come over here and I go to run this, I can say node and delegate. And that's completed. So to conclude, basically I was able to do the same thing with inheritance by using this delegate pattern, but one of the things that's nice about this, I'm completely decoupled from the from this worker object. So I didn't have to inherit from it in order to be able to do this. I just basically set a reference back to my delegate object. And so that is the delegate pattern. So if you like the content on this channel, please give me a thumbs up. If you don't like the content on this channel, you can give it a thumbs down, but please just give it a thumbs up anyways. And if you want to, please subscribe to this channel. You'll get updates from YouTube on when I have new videos coming out, and it helps the algorithm. So with that, have a nice evening.